past 4 weeks, JJ's been walking us through the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, if you're completely new to church, you probably have even heard at least the term the Good Samaritan, and maybe you're familiar with this story. But the story basically lays out like this. Jesus engages in a conversation with a young man who's a lawyer, and we kind of think that the lawyer was trying to catch Jesus, kind of trick him into saying something that maybe went against the law. And so he engages Jesus in this conversation, and they begin to talk about what faith looks like. And then Jesus kind of turns the corner and he says, the guy asks the question, he says, "Who is my neighbor?" And Jesus answers by telling a story. And that's where the Good Samaritan comes from. And the story goes like this. There's a guy who gets robbed and beaten, and he's laying on the side of the road. And if someone doesn't come along and take care of him, he's never leaving there. That's going to be the end of him. But so some people come along. First, a priest comes along, and he sees the guy on the side of the road, and he makes a detour, goes to the other side of the road, and just passes him by. Now, this is a guy who worked in the temple. The guy that you would think, if anyone's going to reach out to this guy, it's going to be him. But he makes a detour and goes around. And then next, another guy comes, a Levite, who also worked around the temple. He wasn't the priest, but he worked around the temple. Same thing, detour, goes around, ignores the guy. And then the final guy is the guy who shows up, who is not even the same race as this guy who's gotten beat up. He's not the same religion. I mean, they have some similar beliefs, but the Jews really looked down on these Samaritans. And it's the Samaritan who comes along and realizes if someone doesn't help, this guy is done. And so he picks him up, carries him to the next town, puts him in an inn. He doesn't go to the local ER and just dump him out and leave him there. He goes to the inn, he stays with him, and he takes care of him. I mean, he nurses the guy, takes care of him, then gives some money to the innkeeper and says, "I'll be back to check on him. I'll be back." And this kind of, the crowd who was listening to Jesus tell this story are probably in awe at this point, wondering what in the world, a Samaritan wouldn't do that. What is this story about? And here's how Jesus finishes the story. We're going to look at two verses. Starting in verse 36, it says this: "Which of these three," so Jesus finishes the story by asking another question. He says, "Which of these three," talking to the lawyer, "do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" And the lawyer says in verse 37, he said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." You go and do likewise. And so I hope that that's kind of the point of today, and really the point of this whole series. We can talk about how to be a neighbor, but unless we go and do likewise, we're not really a neighbor.